And furthermore, and if you read this book, you will realize that we all have a little bit more to give. Mentally and physically, you can go further, you can push harder, you can be more ruthless if you have to be, and you can also show more mercy. You can be better. I can be better. We can all be better. And we most often get better not from the easy things and not from the good times, but from the hard times and the challenges and the suffering in life that pushes you to your breaking point and demands that you give absolutely everything you have. But you have to keep going. So, no matter what, keep going. And I think that's all that I've got for tonight. It's a rough one.
Yeah. It's crazy how it got that crazy, that vicious in like that short period of time.
It is, and we got to remember that's what we have, one perspective from one squad in one platoon, and there was, the story of two pair. The one where the battalion commander, H. Jones, won the Victoria Cross, by the way. What about that? What about that story?
Yeah.
And not to mention the Royal Marines that were down there as well. What about their stories?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I still can't wrap my head around the amount of untold stories that there are. And not just the fact of the stories. But to think that because this battle was a very short time compared to Vietnam or World War II or World War I or even the wars that we've been fighting today that have been going on for years and years and years. But it's not so much that the story that like we're missing the story, but these people existed everywhere.
Yeah.
And they exist everywhere. And yeah, it's an incredible. Take a look at the book, buy the book, and read it. And I got into some of the graphic stuff. Some of the interaction to them when they're not in combat is it's real crude, and I didn't cover much of it. Not that I wanted to get to more of the combat concentration. That's kind of, I didn't realize that I didn't cover as much as sort of just the straight up crude behavior that they. I mean, they're on the boat for a while. They're drinking. They're getting drunk when they're coming home. There's some crude behavior and things that are taking place, and that's kind of why I jumped on the opportunity to read Tommy by Kipling, because that's totally true. Then you know what they say in kind of our way of saying that in the SEAL teams? We'd say this: that guy's a in case of war break glass kind of guy.
Oh yeah.
Meaning we don't want him around all the time. We want to keep him over here on the side.
In the glass.
But yeah, if something happens, break glass and we'll get this this frogman out. Now, what's jacked up about that is that played more of a role when I was first in the SEAL teams, and the older I got and the more mature I got, the more I realized like that's okay, but it doesn't really work. What you need is to have someone that you can have out of the glass.
Yeah.
And that learns. And what you have to do as a leader is you take those guys that, instead of putting those guys in a glass jar or behind in a glass box somewhere and keep them there in case of war. What you do is you do what you do with a freaking wild dog. You have to train them. You have to bring them out. You have to socialize them amongst the humans so that they can interact. Because a guy that you have to keep in behind a glass barrier from the rest of the world, the chances of you needing him for that type of situation are pretty minimal. So what about all the other situations that he'd be beneficial for? Yeah. So what you have to do as a leader is teach those guys that have the attitude of, I'm just a nothing but a straight warrior, don't care about anything else. I'm here to go to war. Otherwise, leave me alone. What you want to do is you want to get those guys out into the world, socialize them like a good attack dog that's not going to bite anything in front of it. It's going to actually bite what you want it to bite. And then you have something that's a much more valuable, not only for you as a leader, but for them. Yeah. Because they have a much better opportunity. So there's still a few guys left in the old mold of, in case of war, break glass, but most of the guys now are actually more versatile than that. Yeah. And I'll tell you, when I was young, I was probably falling in that category.
You're the break glass guy.
I wasn't exactly the guy you wanted to throw out in front of the admiral to look at, right? And say, oh, this is our model guy right here. Yeah. It's, it wouldn't have been that way. Now, as the older I got, the more I recognized how important having that both sides of the coin covered. And you couldn't just be a freaking rampaging berserker all the time. You had to actually be a professional. Sure. You had to be a professional. Yeah. And so I definitely had my share of time spent in that zone. Back in the day. But what's good is I think guys knew that about me, and that therefore when I came up to him and said, hey man, look, we got to do better than that, or hey, we can't be acting like that, they knew that I wasn't coming to them from a what's that word, from the ivory tower. I wasn't looking down on them like, oh, I can't believe you'd act that way. Right. We don't act that way. We're naval representatives. I wasn't coming to him like that. Right. I was coming to him, hey, we're professionals. We want to get hired to do jobs. We want to kill bad guys. We got to get missions. We got to get mission approval. Those were the things that I kind of passed on to my guys. Yeah. Was, hey, that's cool. Be a frogman, but be a disciplined frogman. Yeah. Be a frogman that can represent. And I think that's another thing in the book when there's no war going on. How are they? They're kind of maniacs, Yeah. And then when the war breaks out, they go even more maniac style. And it's almost like they get into that mode of like, oh, who cares anyways? Yeah. We're gonna die. We're gonna die. We just who cares? Right. But after you go to war for an extended period of time, you're like, actually, you're not gonna die. Yeah. Actually, there's a decent chance you're going to live. And there's a decent chance that you need to continue to build, the reputation of the SEAL teams, not just as we're killers, but we're professionals. Yeah. So, and we should have a reputation of both. And we do, by the way.
I think so.
Professional killers is right. But yeah, it's a great book. There's a lot to learn from it. There's a lot to learn. Again, that the way that they're going from peacetime, and again, I know that they were doing tours in Ireland at the time, and that was no joke. And they took casualties in Ireland, and there was many soldiers killed in Northern Ireland. But that wasn't comparable to what they went through in the Falklands. So it was interesting to see how they handled approaching combat for the first time.
Yeah, another part that I think these books really bring to light is just the physical conditions that they go into. Even talking to you guys, when you guys talk about how hot it is, then every once in a while you'll add a detail like, oh yeah, so I'm like, all my clothes are all wet from my sweat. And usually that's not part of the movie when you watch the movie, or like these guys, his feet are falling off, because it's cold and
I was sitting in a combat outpost in Ramadi, and it was nighttime, right? The coolest part of the day. And I wasn't doing anything, and I hadn't been doing anything in a while. I was literally sitting in a combat outpost. The boys were out in an Overwatch position, and I was back there. I'd been coordinating, but I did it. It wasn't that established of a combat outpost yet, so I still had all my gear on. But I was just sitting there. I'd been sitting there for, let's call it 2, 3, 4 hours. And I was sitting there, and I just kind of put my I was sitting down and I angled my back to like a 45-degree angle, and I was kind of looking at the ground, kind of resting a little bit.
Yeah.
And as I looked down, I was full athletic sweat dripping off me like that fast. And I wasn't doing anything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that's the bait.
It
That's what you
gets hot.
start with.
Yeah, that's where you
know,
start.
Not to mention guys' legs getting blown off, all this stuff, all these. Yeah, man. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's the physical, and the other big thing is the physical conditioning that you need to be prepared for is humping with a rucksack on.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. They don't show a lot of that.
No.
In any kind of military training, they don't just show it. They don't show it enough. They should.
Yeah.
They should. I mean, we just did another trip up to Yosemite, and we got our boots on.
Sure.
And it's if you're not conditioned for that, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
And you can make it through a day.
Yeah.
Maybe you can make it through 2 days, but also you're not carrying. I was telling my kids up there, up in the mountains, you're not carrying any weight compared to what you carry with when you have gear. When you when you go tactical, you probably have 30 pounds maybe.
Yeah.
If you're just camping or whatever, you got a couple liters of water.
Mm-hmm.
You got a sleeping bag and a ground pad. You got some trail mix, maybe a little bit more food, but you're talking 30, 40 pounds. Tops.
Yeah.
You get geared up, bro. I would weigh guys before we'd send them out on training operations. I'd weigh them. Training operations. Their rucks would weigh like 110 pounds. Your gear alone, your body armor, helmet, ammo, magazines and ammo, grenades, you're 60, 70 pounds. Then you put water in it. You're talking, I think I weighed like 310 or something with my gear on. Seriously.
Like RoboCop.
Yeah.
RoboCop's still heavy on Rogue. I think it was part 2 where he shocks himself because he wants to get rid of the messed up directives he got given. He falls down. Right? He's unconscious. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, hey, we got to help him. They try to pick him up.
Oh, he's too heavy to move.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Same
actually
thing.
happened to, we were on a training exercise in TU Bruiser, and I got put down. They said, hey, Jocko, you're dead. So I laid down, and I just laid there. And Leif came over to throw me in the back of the Humvee. I was like RoboCop down there. So Leif got a couple buddies, and he's like, hey, guys, help me move Jocko. Still not moving.
Dead weight
and
Jocko.
And then they're like, okay, yep.
You were like making an extra effort to be dead weight.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You're like,
I'm
that?
fully participating in the training exercise. I wanted those guys to be prepared to put a grenade in my mouth and leave me there. So, get some.
Jocko.